Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 336. Should we constantly be seeking and pushing for new opportunities in our career? Or is there something we can do to pull opportunities in our direction? Srikanth Bollavaram is back with us to help answer this question. Today, Srikanth leads a product development organization for a consumer packaged goods company, and you'll get to hear part 2 of his story this week. If you missed part 1 of the story in episode 335, we talked about Srikanth's experience in mechanical engineering and computer science and his desire to continue learning, which has remained constant over the course of his career. We talked a lot about relocation and how this presented opportunities in both the financial and railroad industries for Srikanth. We also heard about how Srikanth embraced that industry expertise, truly understanding the practical application of the technology in these industries and how it impacted their operations. If you did listen to last week's episode, did you do the homework and go back and listen to episode 325 featuring guest Daniel Lemire? If you didn't, pause this episode right now, go back and listen to that one, and then listen through this discussion with Srikanth. I think you'll understand why I assigned it once you do. So what's on the docket for part 2 this week? You're going to hear about a pattern of Srikanth being pulled into new opportunities or having new opportunities presented to him. He'll tell us what he thinks caused this pattern or at least contributed to it over time. It has something to do with being well-rounded in his experience, but there's more to it. We'll talk about that tension between growth and comfort and how that factors into the story. Srikanth will also share how he weighed job decisions and what elements should be factored into these decisions for all of us. You'll also hear about the opportunities Srikanth has had to become a people leader and what made that just as exciting as working on the technology. Here we go with part 2 of our discussion with Srikanth Bollavaram. Was it normal for people who were brought in to do some of the things you needed to do for the railroad to have or be very interested in that deep operational knowledge of the business operations, the business engineering systems, marry that with the technology that was needed for, well, I guess we'd call it operational technology now.
Yeah. When I went to the railroad, the first thing I started was with the, digitization of the customer interaction. So I didn't directly go to the operational side. And this goes back to my comment. First, you have to gain some credibility in whatever you do. It doesn't matter what that work is. In those days, railroad was operated by the customers calling, fax, emails. My job was to digitize all those interactions end to end, from all the way billing, tracking, tracing, payments and whatnot. So we did that very effectively. I did that for a couple of years, and then I looked around and I saw these interesting projects. Then I thought I do have some of these skills. To your point, I am I have engineering and I've got master's degree and all. And a lot of times it's not me seeking, and this is actually very repeated pattern in my career, is the people identified me as a potential candidate for those and then pulled me into those roles, whether it's an architect role or even a principal engineer role for the control systems, very critical jobs. It was the leaders, though, in the company identified me as a potential company and just started giving me those opportunities.
Did that happen on and off before you formally moved? Was it something that they asked you if you were interested in, or was it just purely like a pull as opposed to you doing a little bit of pushing?
Well, they did ask me most of the time, but I did know there was at least one project, which was one we talked about, right? The whole control systems, which is we call as a dispatch center, which orchestrates all the switches and signals and communications to the locomotives. That one was, I was selected and then said, hey, we want you to do this job. The project wasn't going very well at that point. So it was in the company, it was not considered a good move. One thing you will see in my career is like I always choose in the path less traveled and tried and see, okay, let's see what happens. And if that is interesting enough and challenging enough, you just go and try it, give your best and see what happens. And that always, at least to me, it worked out well. I gained an experience which I wouldn't have if I thought what would have been best for me rather than looking at my superiors and they're telling me, hey, maybe you should do this, right? I probably would have chosen something in my comfort zone as an extension to my comfort zone. All these things actually pushed me out completely out of my comfort zone. And then I had to go and figure out, especially if you've been asked to do it and if your seniors trust you enough to that you could do it, just do it. You may not like it initially, but that would add a very valuable experience for you.
The comfort zone has many layers. There's location, where you live, whether, this job's going to suit your family, whether it's going to be in a totally different industry, whether you're going to focus on a completely different set of problems to solve, whether you're working with a whole new set of coworkers, even an element of, am I going to be an individual contributor still, or some kind of technical lead or people manager? Was there a transition of level as part of this too? Like, did you start individual contributor and then move up from there, or were you placed into a leadership position as part of this?
In the railroad, I started as an individual contributor, but quickly became a tech lead, and then to more of an architect role as a side, like which is also a bit of a leadership role. But this one was like a director role. So yes, I was put in a leadership role. So that was, of course, a move up for sure. One of the things I used to do, and I think I still do, is instead of seeking for a next level job, you try to do a next level job, right? In your current position. And then that automatically opens up positions for you. And I think pull is always better than a push, in my opinion. Creating those opportunities and making you as an ideal candidate is how I operated. And of course, there were opportunities other ways too, but it all depends on, to your point, Nick, is where you are at in your career and what is that involves, right? Like, you just talked about, is it a relocation? Is it a new company? And, you have to new job. How many changes can you adapt at the same time? But also where you're not only in career, but in your family wise, where your kids are at, in terms of, they're early in the school versus, you're in the middle of high school or going to colleges. You may not want to make those decisions, not necessarily because you don't want to take risk, but you don't want to really impact the stability or the things your family looking forward. So it's a combination of those. That's why when somebody asks, it's always based on the context at which you're taking that decision. But regardless, one thing always works is make yourself as a candidate for few things, not just one thing. Building credibility, getting critical experience across, taking opportunities within the company to go across. I think that will enable for success in any organization. And one of the thing I think this when I was working in a railroad, he used to tell me is, hey, think yourself as a stock, your skills and things at your current company. You almost should be like giving it to discount to your current company than outside. So like, if you're traded out in the market, you should always be more valuable outside than to the current company. That's how in a lot of ways you're providing more value where you're operating, right? So I think that to me was really impactful. You don't look at not always, hey, what level I want to go, but improve your skills and your capabilities in a way that you're always operating a discount to wherever you're operating it means you're giving more value, right? And then for whatever reason, if you move out, you always go up versus down.
I like that.
Just going back to the idea of growth versus comfort, I think another pattern that we've come across is people saying that you can't actually grow when you're 100% comfortable. When you're 100% comfortable, you're operating within your capabilities, and growth means learning new things and pushing beyond, what you maybe are comfortable doing. And so it always helps to have people who are, subtly pushing you. And then you also talked about, being pulled into these things and people thinking that you would be good in something. And that speaks to maybe having a brand within an organization as somebody who's adaptable and can problem solve and can troubleshoot. Maybe a danger in being really good at troubleshooting is that you constantly get thrown into potentially failing projects. That's something to look out for. But I think it is good to be thought of in that light. And then, once people have you in mind as somebody who is, capable and has things like that knowledge and ability, then they think of you when when those opportunities come up. I mean, with that in mind and in that context, maybe we could talk a little bit about, that transition to leadership, and then maybe even the transition outside of the railroad into the consumer packaged goods industry, because it's a little bit difficult to make a jump from organization to organization based on an internal organizational reputation, unless there's already a strong partnership and you've worked at the interface between those two organizations. So I'm interested to hear that story as well. But maybe we should focus on that leadership first, that push to leadership.
From the leadership perspective, right, I think you're right. If you're comfortable in your job, that means you're probably not growing. And the other aspect I have seen at least is if you have good leaders and good mentors, they always see a blind side which you probably not seeing, and they probably seeing and saying that, hey, go do these things in order to build that muscle. That was the guidance I got when I was in Railroad, or even, the current company. People were always coaching me or guiding me. But going into the leadership role, right, I think, when I moved off the Railroad, it was not a easy decision. It was more of, a family decision. We were in a small town, and, I was mentioning my kids were still in elementary school at that time, and we wanted to move out someplace warm. Like, we got tired of a bit of a snow, and my family had some other extended family members in Dallas area. So then we decided, if you have to do it early. You can't do it later in your career. And the idea was for me to make a job change. I was somehow thinking that I'll still work at the railroad, but it so happened that the opportunity of this came around, and this company wanted to build a digital platforms. And I had as I said, right, in railroad, we were building everything soup to nuts. I had a very good knowledge in terms of how to build those platforms. So I took that as an opportunity to come and start a new career, right, in the CPG industry. But what you said is totally true. You just have to start from zero again in terms of your credibility and your relationships. It's going to be a struggle, not only because you're trying to build that within the company, but you're adapting to new environment, new city, your whole family is adopting. So it was a bit stressful, to be honest, at least in the initial years. The excitement for me was like, how do we build a new culture in the team, build our own solutions, build our own products. So that kind of energized me to build a new culture in terms of how do we build the platforms, how do we make the platforms like a product. And we were doing it in cloud. It was really exciting in terms of the capability we are building. In terms of leadership, first you have to establish yourself as a credible leader. You have to bring along your team. I think that's something from time to time you have to go through. You have to go through this phase of reinventing yourself to come out more of a strong leader on the outside. And you can always say this looking back. But I think that's where, to me at least, whenever I look at my career and whatnot, I could connect the dots backwards, but I cannot today. If you ask me, say, I don't know, if something I probably cannot answer whether that was, there's a good decision or not. So hopefully that answers the question, because the reason we moved out was more of a family reason, not necessarily I wanted to move up in a career or have, a different position.
I think that is fascinating, especially the ability to tell a story looking back and recognizing that that doesn't mean that at that inflection point, you know what the story is going to be, because there's a range of possibilities in any decision, right? I'm sure that we can all look back and see that my success or failure was based on something that was out of my control or a decision that somebody else made that I had no influence on and didn't depend on how good the work that I did was. I did great work, and then it was somebody else's choice, and I could come out ahead or not. It's just a haze of possibilities, right? And probabilities, not
Yes.
a certain path that you can say, oh, I definitely am navigating this path to where I want to go.
And some people are really good at, hey, this is where I want to go. Good. That's good if you know exactly, somebody wants to be a CEO as an example, to me, I'm more open. I'm going to trust the process and see where it leads me. And what I learned in the process is establishing the relationships, building credibility. And while you're working, not only think for your success, but how do you make sure you're always thinking of people who are working, how they're going to be successful. And if you kind of go with that attitude, more of a team culture, your peers and colleagues, and you kind of always go and say, hey, how do I make them successful, not just me? What happens is it creates an environment. And I'm not just saying from the career wise, right? You go through these projects or programs or roles, whatnot. It's beautiful afterwards, the relations you establish are long lasting if you go with that process. And that to me is more valuable than any roles or positions you held, because you always measure, as I said, like you can connect the dots backwards, but also looking forward, what you need to make sure is, are you developing the next leaders? Are you making others successful, not only yourself? Are you learning? Are you getting out of your comfort zone? If these are all checks, I think, it's more likely than not, good things will happen, right? And not only good things happen, people do remember you, and it's fun to go and talk about it later, just like Nick and we are talking right now, right?
Yeah.
That's to me more important than worrying about where I'm gonna land and worry about those things.
That perspective that you just shared, the thing you figured out was more important than any one component. Is that what it truly means to progress as a leader once you become one? Or is there another element we're not considering?
See, when you're a leader, the most important thing is you have to deliver the results. That is like non-negotiable. But then comes how you do it. Then the process I was talking about, right? I think you could achieve the results in various ways and go about it. But if you kind of do it in the right way, like empowering people, like learning yourself, be open and create a positive culture within the team and all that, you can look back and be proud of those results, right?
Of course.
And it's again personal. I read a lot, and then one time I read a book called like True North. It talks about what are your values and what you're going to do with it. And you operate based on that. As a leader, delivering results is non-negotiable, but how you do it is based on what your values are, what you enjoy, what you cherish. Is very personal to the leaders, and I think that's where I adopt some of the things which are very important to me, not compromising the results, but still go with the way. Try. Sometimes it's very hard as you grow up in the organization. It's very hard to execute, deliver the results in the right way. But that's where the real leadership test comes, right? Leadership is more of, to me, a responsibility, and it's not a title. It's more of a responsibility and towards the people you're working with and towards the mission at hand and all that. So hope that makes sense.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And it gave me an idea for my next question. Every leader has a mission to deliver results. And those results are usually based on the purview of your team, the internal organization in which it operates. So when you're a leader and you're open to new opportunities, just as you said, and you are given the chance to embark on a new mission and go and lead a new team, how do you make that transition so that you can keep those relationships with the old team while you build up the new?
So there are a couple of parts to it. One is, it goes back to what I said. It's not only you're succeeding, but the people working with you, whether within your team, others are succeeding too. So the way, whenever I take up a role, what I see is, okay, you're there for a reason to solve a problem, right? If you do it effectively within a year or two, that position shouldn't be there technically, right? I mean, you can depend on going situation to situation, but really, in the sense, going back to your question, if you have a team, if you develop appropriate leaders, you established processes or procedures or the culture in a way that, and you identify the leaders who are taking more in responsibility and you grow them, any of them should be able to take it and run with it. What that opens up is, one, you basically make sure when you're put into a situation, you streamline that position in a way that you give an opportunity to anybody in your organization can take it, run with it. You develop the next gen leaders, but also you leave the position in a better place than what you found it to be, so that it is not as complicated as it was when you taken in. So that whoever coming in also, they could take that, but also could potentially take more, right? So that's how I see it. So if you do that well, you don't really spoil any relationships because you're growing the people, you're solving the problem, you're not making it as a person independent versus more of an independent system that will run it, work itself. I think to me that I'm probably mixing a bit of a leadership and managerial, right? So if you create a system effective enough, it probably can run itself. That's what I do every role I take, like within a year or two, it should be done by somebody within my team. First, it should be in a better place than what I found it to be. Second, you put in enough place that anybody from your team should be able to run it.
This reminds me of the way we should coach young people to become adults, train them to the point where they don't need us as parents as much anymore.
At least, what you aspire or you try to be is to leave the place in a better place than what you found it to be. And as long as you can do that and you develop the next generation leaders and you make sure the mission is not compromised just because you're taking, others, I think it all works out okay.
Where I thought Nick was going was talking about the theory of constraints in process engineering. The goal isn't to engineer a system where you are the constraint and it can only operate when you are there. That's the opposite of a process engineering, is to remove all constraints. And if the leader is the constraint on the organization, then
that's right.
That's probably a leadership issue.
Actually, you're absolutely right. The theory of constraints works. Actually, we talk about in DevOps and whatnot. It's not so different in leadership too. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Until you said that, I hadn't really thought about the leader as possibly being, one of those constraints. You always think about people in operational roles. Naturally, this person has become the wizard at X, Y, and Z, so they are at the center of 12 different processes. But if the leader is there catalyzing a change that perpetuates itself beyond the leader's presence, that's a successful change.
Yes.
Because your move to the next position is identifying and exploiting the next constraint.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a great thought, John. I love that.
It's funny because I immediately, there's the Nick part of my brain that went, this is what Nick is about to say.
And then I know, when we were working, this is what all we were trying to do in the operations, right? Or even the platform engineering or whatnot, eliminate the constraints and everything. And it works wonderfully, right? Once you do all that, it does. Some of the things we think of undoable or and we did that, right? When we were doing those platform engineering. Platform can run itself, they can destroy themselves, they can repave themselves. I mean, we did all that. So how did that happen? Like, you eliminate constraint by constraint. Yeah.
Well, another constraint in all this, especially when you go into leadership, is time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, you have to deliver the results. You want to be able to care for your team and build the next generation of leaders, but you only have so much time. So, Srikanth, based on your perspective as a leader and how you've grown over time, what's some advice for leaders or potential leaders listening to this on how to be careful with their time so that they don't burn out? They don't let the job consume them, maybe setting some of those boundaries to focus on the things that are really important.
I think about this in multiple layers. First is take care of yourself. What I mean by that is, have a good fitness regimen, exercise, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of whether your family or the team, what you're operating under, right? It gets really important to maintain your health, not only health in terms of physical fitness, but also mental fitness in the sense, what helps me is learn some kind of meditation or something where you kind of take all the noise out and reset your mind from time to time. And I think those are very important. Self-care, and then make sure your family care, right? You make sure you're doing the responsibility you have with the family. Your job, if you're gone, that can be replaced, but in the family, that cannot be. So that's important too. And then the work, right? I think to me is a continuous learning. What I say is take care of yourself, take care of your family. I think it also depends on how you manage your time and all that, which, I'm not saying I'm the expert at it, but I'm, every day I'm trying to learn on how to do this better by developing new leaders, by developing new processes and new systems in a way that you operate only by exception, but not like everything is an exception. And over the time, you kind of reduce those exceptions, right? That's how you need to do it. But also, I think you have to continuously learn too, because a lot of stress comes when you're only seeing problems day to day. You may be solving the problems, but you have to have something else to enrich your mind and, other than the work and activities outside. I think it's all about balance. It will go off balance many times, but it's how quickly you come back to it, right? Is a key, and not be in that state forever. And it can happen. And putting some guardrails, I think somebody says, plan your big rocks in terms of your fitness time, your vacation time, and all that. Plan those and then work everything else around it. Then you need those breaks to kind of reset and rejuvenate and come back and, operate it effectively. Work-life balance, I think it's so intertwined now, it's very difficult to say what that is. Kind of if there is a playbook or something, no, you just have to, within your context, create that and what works best for you. But I would say your self-care and family, those are non-negotiables.
Those are part of delivering your results as a human being who wants to be able to keep working.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if we're going to be able to go out and anything more relevant to all of us than that. Srikanth, I just really appreciate the time that you spent with us. I think you're dripping nuggets of wisdom along the entire journey that you walked us through, and just really appreciate the time and the insight.
No, thank you, John and Nick. And I think as I'm talking with you guys, it's almost I'm reflecting on myself to my journey and what I learned from it. So thanks for this opportunity, and thanks for all those good questions and reflecting on my career also. So appreciate that. Yeah.
If anybody wants to follow up and ask you additional questions on this conversation, Srikanth, once it goes live, where can they find you?
I think you can reach me on LinkedIn. Absolutely. LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me.
We'll make sure to include your LinkedIn link in the show notes if anybody wants to follow up with you. Thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you. Thank you both.
We We heard it a couple of different times during the discussion this week and a little bit last week. Srikanth was open to new opportunities throughout the course of his career to gain different kinds of experience in different areas. And he talked about how he made job decisions. Family factored a lot into the decisions. And he cautioned us in this discussion to be careful about changing too many things at once. How many changes could you handle at one time? You might not know the answer to that until you try something. Part of the reason I suggested everyone go back and listen to episode 325 featuring Daniel Lemire, it was an example of someone who tried to take on more change than they were really able to handle. In Srikanth's case, a lot of the job decisions he needed to make were because opportunities came to him at the suggestion of leaders. There were leaders he worked with who understood his capabilities and skills, and they knew that there was something else that he was qualified to do. So they nudged him in the direction of taking these new opportunities. How did they know what his capabilities and his skills were? Well, he had built credibility by delivering results, but part of what you have to do, and I'm sure Srikanth did this, even though we didn't talk about it, is communicate to your manager in one-on-one meetings. We need to be able to share some of our wins with our managers so they understand that we're doing a good job. Are we hitting the metrics and completing the tasks that they've asked us to do to meet and exceed their expectations? And hopefully, we're documenting all of these things too. Srikanth told us to focus more on building our skills and capabilities than seeking out a specific job role or title. Because what is it that gets us a new job? It's skills and capabilities that are meeting the job requirements. So if you haven't taken stock of what the skills and capabilities you need to start building for what's next are, maybe it's time to give that some thought. What's an area you need to sharpen? What's a new area that you have no skills in that you need to build some skills in? And it's probably going to depend on what you do right now and what you might like to do in the future that helps you make those decisions. You might need a mentor or someone else to give you some feedback on what to do, but it's worth giving some thought, especially since we're past the mid-year point. How have you done in the last 6 months, 7 months? We heard about Srikanth stepping into leadership. And I don't want you to leave this discussion and think that it was just a step from individual contributor to people manager. It wasn't. He went through the progression points of being a technical lead. He was an architect, even a principal engineer. This is similar to the story of a number of other guests who have made the progression similar to this before taking on a people leader role. And in each of those steps between just an individual contributor all the way to people leader, there are responsibilities of those roles that require someone to demonstrate leadership or take the lead in specific tasks or groups. Part of the mindset shift in being a people leader, Srikanth told us about this, was to focus on the success of others. Focus on building up future leaders who could take over running the team once he was ready to move on. Part of focusing on the success of others would be to improve the state of the team or leave things better than the way he found them. Improve processes. Create systems that could optimize and remove roadblocks. Notice he's still building systems, by the way. A great episode to go back and listen to that I think pairs nicely with this is episode 244 with Tim Crawford. He talks about the decision point between being a manager and being an individual contributor. Managers like to build people over building technology. I hope you enjoyed these discussions with Srikanth, and if you still didn't do the homework and go back and listen to that episode with Daniel Lemire, you should. We'll see you next week with another series of discussions kicking off.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.